Hey guys, so today I'm going to show you a little video of a sort of modified caddis that can work in several patterns that has worked really well for me this spring out on the Chattooga River. I feel like a lot of times beginners can watch videos of very technical flies that they don't really need that technicality to catch a heck of a lot of fish. And I've experimented around this spring with different patterns and really found that as long as you have size and general color matching your hatch, you're going to have a lot of action on top water if you can put that dry fly in the right place. So I'm tying a very simplified blue-winged olive on a size 14 hook, just with some very simple things, some just standard olive green dubbing, some gray Chinese saddle hackle dyed gray feathers, which work really well, and we've got a little olive green 8/0 thread here that we're using. So I'm just getting that feather ready. I used this in 3 patterns. I have used it in 3 patterns so far. Yellow sulphur, which is your yellow dubbing and your white hackle and tail feather. I've used blue-winged olive, which is your green dubbing, your olive green dubbing, and your gray hackle. And then I've also done it for a kind of elk hair caddis pattern with just some tan dubbing and some ginger hackle, and they've all worked exceptionally well. I've compared them to elk hair caddises, and they work just as well. They just look more realistic. A lot of people, especially beginners, don't understand this, but mayflies just have super thin bodies, and their wings are very basic, very small. And when you get into more technical flies like your caddises, your elk hair caddises, even into some of the easier ones like your sulphur duns, just all the extra wings of different colors and stuff like that doesn't do you any good. All you really need is a good solid floating fly, and there's some exceptional tricks that will help you do that. So we've just gotten a little tail on, just your hook length for the tail. I like to leave it a little bit long. I like a long tail. Just putting on a little dubbing and getting ready to put that olive green dubbing on. Just doing that real fast. Also, make sure you leave a tag on your thread when you're starting it, because we are going to wrap this up afterwards, after we've gotten our dubbing on. So generally you'll hear, and this holds pretty true, that you want a taper going from the back to the front of the fly. I find, yeah, that's generally true. I haven't been fishing long enough to tell a difference between the flies that have a little bit of a bump on the back and those that don't. Doesn't really matter to me. They still catch a heck of a lot of fish, especially when you're using that tag. So we're just going to wrap that up the body. I usually try to do 4 to 6 wraps, just getting it on the body. That just ensures that the first time your fly gets hit hard, it's not going to fall apart, because, you know, those trout have those jagged little bumps in their mouth, and they will shred the dubbing on a fly. So we're just going to do a few wraps here and go ahead and seal that off with 1 or 2 wraps. And clip that remaining tag off. And I mean, these flies are so simple. You can tie, if I'm working fast, I can tie one of these in 4 or 5 minutes. They are just so simple, and they're effective as heck. I was out on the Chattooga last weekend, and I was fishing solely with these things, and it was sunny. It was 75 degrees. It was not prime top water. It was not prime dry fly time. And I was catching them left and right. And not the stalkers. I'd walk down like 2 miles from where, you know, everyone fishes for the stock, you know, 10-inch little footballs, little fat footballs. No, I was going for the wilds, and I was catching wilds on these things because there was a solid blue-wing olive hatch going on in sizes 14 to 20. And, I mean, every size under the sun. They're scattered hatches, and, you know, you just see a fish rise, and you work your way over and you cast on it. And I was, like, 75% of the time when I was casting onto these fish, they were absolutely destroying it. Like, they couldn't resist. It goes to show you don't need much. You just need something simple, and you'll catch fish. And for a beginner, I would much rather you spend more time working on how to actually cast to a fish, working on your stealth instead of trying to cast some fancy $3.50 fly in front of a fish that's not even there. There's no point. You're just going to get discouraged and waste a bunch of money before you figure out, hey, I don't need that. So yeah, we're just going to wrap that hackle. Generally, I try to do it on the front third of the body, just as a rule of thumb. But the nice thing about this hackle is we're actually going to go back and trim it afterwards, which a lot of people do not like to do. But we're going to trim it down to size because it's way too long right now. And part of that trimming will include trimming off a little bit on the back towards the end, just trimming it down towards the dubbing, which helps with buoyancy. It looks realistic, and I mean, there's no side effects. It's just a great thing to do, and yeah, trimming goes a really long way. So yeah, I'm just finishing off wrapping that up, and we're just gonna trim the little piece of feather off there, and then we'll almost be done. And yeah, so we're just gonna trim that off. And we're going to finish it off with our whip finish here in a second. Just make sure that head's nice and tucked back. Get those feathers going pretty much parallel to the body. Just get that hackle looking nice. And we're going to whip finish this. And do try to keep that head small. All you need is 3 or 4. Because we'll put a little head cement on this, and it's sealed in place. It's not going anywhere. So keep your head small and trim it off close, and you'll be all right. All right, so now we are on to the fun part. So the more hackle, the more buoyant, which is awesome because you want a buoyant fly. And so I like to trim it right at the hook shank, if not a little bit smaller. If you've ever seen a mayfly out just sitting on moss or whatever, they're not big. They don't have a lot of what we would call hackle or anything. They're very thin. They're very petite, and we want to try to imitate that while maintaining the buoyancy that we need. I found that this is a really good in between it being thin and subtle and having the buoyancy that you need to get good floats and get good presentation. And honestly, if a trout's hungry, wild, or stocked, it's going to destroy one of these. I haven't had a trout that I've seen take a rising, or I've seen rise up and take a caddis, not hit one of these flies that I've put in its face. It can take 3 or 4 casts to get it where you want it. But I have not seen a trout reject one of these flies yet. Which is pretty crazy. So we're just going to trim that off. And I like to leave just a little bit on top as your wing. We don't need any other color or anything. I just leave 10 to 15 fibers on top, and sometimes I'll do it on the side if I'm doing like a crippled blue wing or a crippled caddis. And that's all you need. Just 10 to 15 fibers on top, and it looks like a wing. Trout can't tell a difference, obviously, because they have been destroying it. So I've coated this in a little hydrophobic coat, just a little dip, just a little fly dip. And it turns it kind of white. But yeah, that's the end product. It looks really good. It's super easy to tie, and the white does not last. As soon as it hits the water, it goes back to its natural colors, despite popular opinion, because people don't actually watch their flies when they hit the water because they don't have good enough vision to. to see it change back to its normal color. But yeah, it looks white right now, but it won't as soon as it hits that water. This sucker is a trout magnet. Tie up a dozen of these and use them. Thank you. Goodbye.